There is no silence more suffocating than the silence inside your own coffin. It is not the silence of peace nor the silence of rest. It is a silence that screams, pressing against your ears, crushing your chest, reminding you that you are buried beneath the weight of betrayal. And worse than the coffin, worse than the dirt being shoveled above me, was the voice I knew better than my own heartbeat, my only son, my Daniel, calm, steady, as if he were discussing the weather, not my death. "Not too deep," he said. "She won't last the night." The sound of his words echoed in the darkness. Each syllable carved another wound in my soul. I lay still, the drug in my veins making my limbs heavy and my head foggy, but my ears were wide awake. I heard every word, every cruel, casual instruction. He thought I was gone, but I was alive, and I was listening. Inside that coffin, my breath came shallow and strained. The air was already warm, already thin. My fingers slid across the rough planks above me, searching for weakness, finding nothing but splinters and nails driven deep. My nails broke as I clawed. My palms bled. I tasted earth when the first clumps of dirt sifted through a crack near my cheek. Death was not creeping toward me. It was already here, pressing down, grain by grain. But in that prison of wood and earth, my mind betrayed me more cruelly than my son ever had. Memories flooded me. I saw him as a newborn, red-faced and wailing, the storm raging outside the hospital window. His father had cradled him once, just once, before his heart failed, leaving me to raise Daniel alone. I remembered rocking him through sleepless nights, singing lullabies with a voice hoarse from double shifts at the diner. I remembered walking home in the rain, shoes full of holes, carrying groceries I could barely afford, just to make sure he had milk and bread. I gave him everything, my youth, my strength, my dreams. When he smiled at me, it was enough. When he said, "I love you, Mom," the pain of every sacrifice melted away. He was my whole world, and now my whole world was standing above my grave, shoveling dirt onto my coffin. The betrayal burned hotter than the fear. How could the boy I carried, the boy I fed, and the boy I sheltered turn so cold? What greed, what hunger could make a man kill his own mother? He had poisoned my tea with a white powder he called chamomile. He had smiled as I drank, as if he were caring for me, but I had seen the powder settle at the bottom. I had poured it into my fern instead, and by morning the poor thing was dead. That was my warning. But I did not run, I did not fight, because a mother's love makes her blind, and mine was blind until it was too late. The hammering of nails filled the air. Each strike was a drumbeat of finality. I pressed my hands harder against the wood, frantic, searching, praying. And then there it was, one nail, loose, not driven as deep as the others. I wrapped my bleeding fingers around it and wrenched. My arms shook, my breath quickened, and the darkness pressed tighter, but the nail shifted. A sliver of hope. Above me, Daniel laughed as if burying his own mother was nothing more than a business deal concluded. And in that laughter I found my strength. He was too sure, too confident. He believed I was finished. He believed I would never rise again. That was his mistake, because he forgot who raised him. He forgot the years I worked through fever, the nights I went without food, and the mornings I stitched his clothes by candlelight. He forgot that he was built from my will, my sacrifice, and my blood, and that blood was still alive, still fighting, still clawing in the dark. The coffin creaked. Another nail gave way. Dirt poured in, choking me, but I pressed harder, every muscle screaming. I would not die here, not like this, not by his hands. I could feel the wood weakening. I could taste freedom, bitter and sharp, just beyond the splinters. And in that darkness, with earth pressing into my mouth, I made a promise. I whispered it to myself, to the night, to God above, and to the sun who thought I would never hear it. I will rise, I will come back, and when I do, I will not come back as the mother you buried. I will come back as the ghost you created. I will come home from the dead, and I will take my revenge. The hands that once held me when I was afraid of the dark are the same hands that nailed my coffin shut. That is a truth no mother should ever have to speak. Yet I lay in that narrow box of wood and shadows, listening to the sound of my only son hammering me into the earth. The rhythm of the blows still echoes in my chest, not just in the boards that pinned me down, but in the place where my heart used to believe in him. Every strike of the hammer was a memory turned against me. Every nail was a reminder that love can rot into something cruel and unrecognizable. I remember those same hands when they were small and soft, curled around my finger on his first night in the world. Daniel was born screaming into a storm, lightning flashing through the hospital window. His father held him for only a moment before death claimed him, leaving me alone to raise a boy who was my whole reason to go on. I can still see him 5 years old, running into my bed in the middle of the night, trembling from a nightmare. I would hold him close, kiss the top of his head, and whisper, "It's all right, Mama's here." He would press those tiny hands into my chest and drift back to sleep, safe because he believed in me. How could those same hands now press nails into my coffin, sealing me away like refuse? I ask myself that as I lie in the dark, the air thinning, the smell of damp soil closing in. How could he, the boy I clothed when my own shoes had holes, the boy I fed when I skipped meals myself, the boy I shielded from every cruelty in this world, has become the cruelest thing in mine? I heard every word. He thought the powder he slipped into my tea had taken me fully, but I had spat enough into the sink to keep my mind alive. My body was weak, but my ears worked like sharpened knives. "Don't dig too deep," he told the man with him. "No one's going to look for her. She'll be gone by morning." His tone was calm and businesslike. He was arranging my death the way some men might arrange a shipment or a sale. Beneath the weight of that coffin lid, I thought of the lullabies I used to sing to him when storms rattled our roof. I thought of his first school play when he forgot his lines and looked into the audience, finding my face, steadying himself with my smile. I thought of the way he once promised he would take care of me when I grew old, swearing I would never be alone. All those promises, all that sweetness, melted into greed. He saw not a mother but money, insurance, property, things he could own faster if I disappeared. The contrast ripped me apart. One half of me wanted to weep until the earth drank my tears. The other half hardened into something sharper, colder. Betrayal does that. It burns until there is nothing left but iron and fire. The dirt began to fall heavier then, shovelful after shovelful, landing on the lid above me. My fingers clawed at the wood, splinters biting into my flesh. My nails broke as I searched for weakness, for escape. Somewhere in the blur of fear and memory, I felt the faintest give of one nail loose. Imperfect, not unlike Daniel himself. Something I thought was whole, revealed to be flawed. I gripped it, tugged, bled, and prayed. Above me, he laughed. My son laughed while burying me alive. The sound was worse than the hammering. It was worse than the suffocating air. It was the sound of a love I thought eternal crumbling into dust. That laugh split me open, and in the crack of my breaking heart, something else took root. I realized then I had already died once. The moment my son betrayed me, the mother who lived for him ceased to exist. What remained was not a victim, but something reborn in fury. He thought the coffin was my ending. He thought betrayal was the last chapter of my story. But he was wrong. The coffin creaked as I pulled harder. Dirt poured in, choking me, but I swallowed it like poison turned medicine. If I must breathe earth to rise, then I would, because I would rise. I would climb out of the grave my own child dug for me, and when I did, I would not come back as the mother he buried. I would come back as the reckoning he created. I whispered it in the dark, a vow no dirt could smother. You put me in this grave, Daniel, but you forget. I taught you how to fight storms, and now I am the storm. I am 70, 3 years old, and this is the story of how my only son tried to erase me from the world. I never imagined I would say such words out loud, but here they are, trembling on my lips. It feels like a confession, like I am letting you peek into the darkest corner of my soul, where betrayal still festers like an open wound. I raised him with love, with sacrifices I never counted, and with a faith that he would carry my name into the future with pride. Instead, he tried to bury me before the world could notice I was gone. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the hammer striking nails into the coffin. Each blow was like a cruel echo of lullabies I once sang when he was a child. I could feel the vibrations in the wooden boards above my face, each one sealing me further away from the sky, from breath, from life itself. What made it unbearable was not the dirt, not the suffocating silence. It was the voice I heard above me. Calm, cold, my Daniel, my only son, telling the man beside him where to dig, instructing him not to go too deep, explaining that no one would bother looking for an old woman on the outskirts of town. He thought I was unconscious. He thought the powder he slipped into my tea had silenced me completely, but I heard everything, every word. I wish I could tell you I did not love him, that he had always been a monster, but that would be a lie. I loved him with the kind of love that shapes every breath of a mother's life. I carried him when I was too weak to carry myself. I worked 2 jobs to buy him shoes when mine were falling apart. I stitched his torn jackets in the glow of a single lamp after long shifts, humming songs so he could sleep soundly. He was my reason to keep living after his father died, and for years I believed he loved me back. That belief, more than the drugs in my body, is what left me helpless. When he came back into my life after years of distance, I welcomed him with arms wide open. I thought God had finally answered my prayers. He cooked for me, cleaned, and asked about my health, and I told myself he had grown into the man I always hoped he would become. I ignored the questions about life insurance, the subtle suggestions to update my will, and the pills he replaced in my medicine cabinet. A mother's heart is foolish like that. It wants to believe even when the truth whispers warnings in the dark. And now that truth pressed down on me in the form of damp wood and falling earth. I lay still, forcing my breath to stay shallow so they would believe I was gone. Inside, my mind burned with memories. I remembered his first steps across the kitchen floor, his arms stretched out for me. I remembered the tears he shed when I told him no to an expensive toy I could not afford. I remembered the way he looked at me the day he swore he would take care of me when I was old. Every memory became a knife, cutting me deeper than the coffin ever could. But here is the part I never told anyone. Even in that moment of betrayal, when I knew he wanted me dead, some part of me still longed for him to change his mind. I waited for the hammer to stop, for his voice to crack with guilt, for him to drop to his knees and pull me free. That is the curse of being a mother. You love even when love destroys you. It did not stop. The hammering went on, the dirt piled higher. The laughter between him and the man helping him floated above me, light and careless, as though they were finishing a chore. I dug my fingers into the wooden lid until splinters tore my skin. My nails broke against the rough grain. I prayed, not for rescue, but for one small weakness, one loose nail, one chance to prove I would not leave this world by my son's hand. And then I felt it, a sliver of give in the corner, a possibility. The coffin creaked under my strain, dirt trickled in, filling my mouth with the bitter taste of earth. My chest ached with each shallow breath. And yet, inside me, something stronger than air kept me alive. It was not just anger. It was not just survival. It was the need to tell this story, to confess it, to let the world know what he tried to do. If I died, no one would hear the truth. But if I lived, if I clawed my way out, my voice would become the weapon he never expected. I am 70, 3 years old. I am a mother. I was buried alive by my own flesh and blood. But I am still here, still speaking, because my story is not finished. He thought he could erase me. Instead, he awakened a part of me I never knew existed. In this part, the one born inside the coffin, will not rest until I have returned from the grave and shown him what it means to betray the one who gave you life. I raised him with everything I had, but greed turned my boy into a stranger who wanted me dead. Those words are carved into me as sharply as the nails that sealed me into that coffin. When I close my eyes, I can still see him as a child, his cheeks round and soft, his laughter like bells in a churchyard. He used to run barefoot across the wooden floors of our tiny home, calling for me when the world outside felt too big. "Mama, don't let go," he would say, gripping my skirt with those little hands, and I never did. I held on through storms, through hunger, through every sleepless night when the roof leaked and I worried if we would make it through the winter. My boy was the center of my universe. I thought that love would last forever. I remember carrying him on my back when he was too tired to walk. My shoulders ached, but his sleepy head pressed against my neck was worth every step. I remember the nights I went to bed hungry so he could have the last piece of bread. I remember pawning my wedding ring, my last reminder of his father, just to buy him a school uniform so he wouldn't feel different from the other children. Every choice I made, every sacrifice, was for him. That is what mothers do. They give until there is nothing left, and then they find a way to give more. But as the years passed, I began to see shadows in him, not all at once, not in great waves, but in small, unsettling ripples. The boy who once ran to me with open arms began to walk away with his hands in his pockets. The boy who once shared every thought with me started locking his door, hiding his eyes, and brushing away my questions with sharp words. Still, I told myself it was just youth, just the stubbornness of a growing man. I thought the love I had poured into him would be enough to carry him back to me. I was wrong. Lying in that coffin, I could hear his voice above me, steady, commanding, stripped of any trace of the boy I had known. "Make sure it's deep enough," he said, "my son, my own flesh and blood," and in that moment the past and present collided inside me. I could see him at 7 years old, holding up a crayon drawing of the two of us with big smiles, telling me, "We'll be together forever, Mama." And then I heard him giving orders to bury me alive, as if I were nothing more than a problem to be solved. The warmth of those memories twisted into knives, cutting deeper because they had once been beautiful. What makes betrayal unbearable is not the act itself, it is the love that came before it. If a stranger had tried to kill me, I would have fought and cursed him with every ounce of strength I had, but this was my son. The child I nursed through fevers, the boy I stayed up with when nightmares kept him awake, the teenager I prayed for when he first walked out the door into a dangerous world. To know that this same child wanted me erased was a horror greater than the coffin pressing down on me. I thought of all the nights I waited at the window for him to come home, the relief that washed over me when I saw him walking up the path. I thought of the birthday cakes I baked even when we had nothing, just flour and sugar stretched thin to make him smile. And then I thought of how he had smiled recently, watching me drink the tea he had poisoned. That smile was not love, it was a victory. Greed had hollowed him out. Greed had taken the boy I raised and replaced him with a stranger wearing his face. I wondered in the darkness if he had always been this way and I had simply blinded myself with love. Did I create this monster by giving too much? Did my sacrifices teach him that I was something to use up, to consume, until there was nothing left but bones? The questions clawed at me as fiercely as I clawed at the coffin lid. The sound of shovels filled the air, dirt raining down on the lid above me. My heart pounded, my breath came short, but in that moment my memories became my strength. Every sacrifice I had made for him was fuel. I had carried him on my back, now I would carry myself out of this grave. I had gone hungry for him, now I would hunger for justice. I had given him life, and he had tried to take mine. But he would learn that I was not so easily erased. I raised him with everything I had, and now with the same fire that once built his life, I would rebuild mine, not as his mother, but as his reckoning. My fingers bled as I clawed through splinters, but pain meant life. Pain meant hope. In that suffocating darkness, every scrape of wood against my skin was proof I was still here, still fighting. The coffin was tight, pressing against my shoulders, my knees curled up against my chest. Each breath grew shorter and thinner, as if the air itself was being stolen away from me grain by grain, like sand falling through an hourglass. My lungs begged for more, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, shallowly, and carefully. Panic would be my executioner faster than the coffin. The first nail I found was crooked, loose just enough to shift beneath my clawing fingers. I pulled until the splintered edge dug beneath my nail bed, tearing it clean away. I bit back a scream, though no one would hear me beneath the layers of dirt already being shoveled over me. Blood slicked my hand, making the wood slippery, but I held on because blood meant life. Blood meant I had not yet surrendered. Above me I could hear muffled voices fading. His voice, my son's voice, still rang like a bell tolling death in my ears. "It's done, she'll be gone before dawn." His footsteps grew softer, retreating. Each step was a betrayal, a goodbye that wasn't mine to give. I pressed harder at the wood, nails cracking, palms raw. The coffin moaned under the weight of the soil, a dreadful creaking that warned me time was running out. My chest convulsed. Dirt seeped in through the edges, sprinkling onto my lips, my eyes, and my hair. The taste was bitter and metallic, laced with the scent of rot and earthworms. I spat, coughed, and clawed harder. My fingers slipped into a tiny gap, no wider than a coin, but it was something. I wrenched at it, ignoring the sting as a jagged edge sliced across my knuckle. My body screamed for rest, but my mind whispered one word again and again: survive. Survive, survive. Every push, every scrape, every gasp became a rhythm, a drumbeat of defiance. My arms trembled, shoulders burning as if fire lived in my bones. Still I pushed, still I clawed. My blood mixed with the dirt, turning it into mud that smeared across my face, my arms, and my chest. I welcomed the sting and the ache because it meant I wasn't gone. Pain meant life, pain meant hope. I thought of his laugh. The cruel sound of it was muffled above me as the dirt fell. It wasn't the laugh of my boy, the one who used to giggle at bedtime stories. It was the laugh of a man who thought he had outsmarted death. That laugh gave me strength. That laugh told me I had to rise, not just for myself, but to prove him wrong. I pressed my shoulders against the lid, pushing until the wood groaned. Splinters stabbed deeper into my flesh, but I bore down, gritting my teeth. I would not let him bury me. Minutes passed like hours, hours like years. My vision blurred, stars flickering behind my eyes from lack of oxygen. My heart pounded so hard it felt as if it would burst through my ribs. Still, I kept clawing. One nail bent loose, then another. A sliver of light, so faint, so fragile, seeped through the crack. My breath caught, ragged and shallow, but it was enough to fill me with a wild, desperate kind of hope. The soil shifted above me as I pushed harder, dirt collapsing into my face, choking me. I swallowed it down like bitter medicine, coughed it out, and pushed again. My body was no longer mine. It was a tool, a weapon, fueled by something stronger than flesh. Every nerve screamed, but I screamed louder in my mind. Survive, survive, survive. Finally, with one last desperate shove, the lid cracked. Cold air rushed in, thin but real, brushing against my sweat-soaked skin. My lungs expanded in a gasp that felt like fire and water all at once. Tears sprang to my eyes, but I didn't stop. I tore at the opening, widening it inch by inch, even as more dirt cascaded in. My body was half buried, but I wriggled, fought, and pulled myself upward like a creature reborn from the earth. My arms shook as I clawed my way through the soil. My chest burned as if flames licked from the inside out. But I kept going because each movement, each bruise, each broken nail was a victory stolen back from death. The night air above waited for me. Freedom waited for me. Revenge waited for me, and then, with one last push, my hand broke through the surface of the ground. Fingers trembling, coated in mud and blood, they reached into the night sky. The earth tried to hold me back, but I dragged myself out inch by inch, gasping, sobbing, and coughing out the grave that had tried to swallow me whole. I lay there on the damp soil, staring at the stars, the world spinning around me. My body was battered, but my spirit roared. I was alive. Against his wishes, against his betrayal, against the coffin meant to silence me, I had risen. And if life had returned to me, then so would justice. My son thought pain would bury me. He was wrong. Pain had saved me. Pain had become my hope. And with that hope, I would rise not as a mother he betrayed, but as the reckoning he would never escape. You can bury a mother's body, but you cannot bury her will to rise from the grave. The night air stung my face as I dragged myself from the soil, coughing out clumps of earth that filled my mouth and lungs. My arms trembled, my chest heaved, but inside me there was a fire no dirt could smother. I lay there for a moment, sprawled across the ground like a corpse spat back out by the earth, staring at the sky I thought I would never see again. The stars burned brighter than I remembered, as though the heavens themselves bore witness to my return. I was not supposed to be alive, but I was, and that meant one thing. Destiny had chosen me to rise, not as a victim, but as something far stronger. My son thought he had ended me. He thought his greed, his betrayal, and his shovel full of dirt would silence me forever, but I was still here. Every broken nail, every splinter buried in my hands, and every bruise across my body was proof that his plan had failed. He had buried his mother, but what clawed its way out of that coffin was not the same woman he tried to erase. Something had shifted in me beneath the ground. Death had brushed against me, and in escaping it, I had shed my old self. I pushed myself to my knees, the cold night air filling my lungs, sharper than knives but sweeter than honey. My body shook with exhaustion, but my spirit surged forward with a strength that felt unbreakable. This was not survival anymore. This was destiny. I had not clawed through blood and splinters only to crawl back into the shadows. I had been reborn for one purpose. Justice. I thought of his face, the smile he wore when he watched me drink the poisoned tea. I thought of the way he laughed as the dirt fell over my coffin. That laugh was carved into me deeper than any wound. It was the laugh of a man who believed he had won. He believed the story was over. But I was going to show him that the story had only just begun. I rose unsteadily to my feet, my dress torn, my hair tangled with soil, my body aching with the weight of death and resurrection. Yet I walked forward with a steadiness that surprised even me. Each step was heavy, but it carried the force of something inevitable. I was not just a mother anymore. I was the storm I had once told him children should never fear. I was the shadow that rose when light tried to die. The village was quiet, the streets empty, but I knew where to go. My son would not run far. Greed never does. Greed anchors men to their stolen treasures, to the houses they believe they own, and to the wealth they think will shield them from consequences. He would be in my home, the one I built with sacrifices he never understood. He would be sitting in my chair, sipping my tea, planning how to spend the money he thought my death had given him. That thought drove me forward, each step lighter than the last, as though fate itself were carrying me, and as I walked, the fear that had once lived inside me faded. There was no fear left. What could frighten a woman who had already clawed her way out of her own grave? Death had tried to claim me and failed. What was left but vengeance? What was left but destiny? By the time I reached the edge of the house, the windows glowing faintly in the dark, I was no longer trembling. My body was broken, yes, but my will was sharper than steel. I pressed my bloodied hand against the wooden frame of the door, leaving a smear that marked my return. I whispered into the night, not for anyone else to hear, but as a promise to myself. You buried me, Daniel, but you buried the wrong woman. The one standing here is no longer the mother you knew. She is the reckoning you made. Inside, I could hear his voice carefree, as if he had shed the weight of me completely. He didn't know. He didn't know the grave had failed to hold me, that the coffin he sealed with his own hands had birthed something stronger than he could ever imagine. I straightened my shoulders. I was ready. I had risen not by chance, but by fate. A will like mine does not die in the dirt. It rises, it hunts, it avenges, and as I stepped through the doorway, I knew with absolute certainty. He could bury my body, but he could never bury my will. I was alive, and I was unstoppable. A mother doesn't celebrate sending her child to prison, but survival is its own kind of victory. That is the truth I live with now, a truth heavier than the coffin he sealed me in. People ask me if I feel proud, if I feel triumphant for clawing my way back from the grave and delivering him into the hands of justice. They don't understand. How could they? There is no pride in watching your own flesh and blood stand before a judge. No joy in seeing the face you once kissed good, night hardened by handcuffs and shame. Victory, for me, tastes like ash. It is bitter, but it is still mine. When I sit alone at night, I still see him as a boy. His small hand wrapped around my finger, his wide eyes looking at me as if I could protect him from every shadow in the world. I hear his laughter as he chased fireflies in the summer fields, and I feel the warmth of his forehead pressed against my lips when I tucked him into bed. Those memories don't disappear, not even when layered over with betrayal, greed, and attempted murder. That is the curse of motherhood. The heart cannot forget what it has once loved. Even after everything, a part of me still aches for that boy, but the man he became, that stranger with my son's face, forced me to bury that tenderness alongside the coffin he tried to trap me in. He had a choice. He could have chosen love, loyalty, and gratitude. Instead, he chose money. He chose to look at me not as a mother, but as an obstacle standing in the way of his inheritance. That choice was his, and the weight of it will follow him into every cell, every night of confinement, and every echo of chains rattling on his wrists. I will not carry that burden for him. He made his bed in the soil he tried to bury me in, and now he must lie in it. The neighbors whispered when the truth came out. They said it was unthinkable, unnatural, a son turning against his mother. They shook their heads, pity in their eyes, and asked me how I could endure such a thing. But I endured far worse in that coffin. I endured silence, suffocation, and the slow approach of death itself. And if I could claw my way out of that grave, then I could endure the world knowing the truth about my son. Survival is not clean, it is not graceful, it is raw, bloody, and desperate, but it is survival nonetheless. There are nights I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, and wonder if things might have been different. If I had done more or less, if I had been stricter or gentler, if I had taught him differently about money, about love, about life. A mother's mind is a battlefield of questions that will never have answers. But one truth silences them all. No amount of love justifies what he did. No sacrifice I made excuses for the way he betrayed me. A coffin is not an accident. Poison is not a mistake. He wanted me gone, and I survived in spite of him. That is the end of it. And yet, even with the horror, there is something else. A strange kind of freedom. For 73 years, I lived for him, for my boy, for his future, for his happiness. I gave until there was nothing left to give. But in that grave, clawing my way through splinters and dirt, I discovered something I had never allowed myself before. I lived for me, I fought for me, I rose for me, and though the world calls it revenge, I call it reclamation. Now, when I walk outside and feel the sun on my face, I cherish it more deeply than I ever did before. Each breath is a rebellion, each heartbeat a reminder that I chose life, that life chose me back. I don't smile when I think of him locked away, but I do breathe easier knowing he cannot hurt me again. That is not joy, it is relief, and relief is enough. So, no, a mother does not celebrate sending her child to prison. My soul carries that sorrow, and it always will. But when I look in the mirror, when I see the lines carved into my face and the scars on my hands, I see not a victim but a survivor. And survival, when death has already brushed against you, is its own kind of victory. I whisper it to myself sometimes in the quiet when the world feels too heavy to bear. I was buried and I rose. I was betrayed and I endured. I was silenced and I spoke again. Those words are not celebration. They are survival. And survival is enough.